Rua tama, wairua tapu, me ngā anahera pono, me te mangai he tautoko mai, anaia nei, ake nei, ai. Te rangi itu nei, te papa e tā koto nei, tātou katoa, te hunga ora, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Today we've gathered to celebrate the life of Tahu Potu Wiremu Rātana, but we're also here to acknowledge the significance of the relationship that he formed with Michael Joseph Savage and the New Zealand Labour Party. One of the first things that I did as a Labour Member of Parliament was to come to the Rātana celebrations back at the beginning of 2009. And the then leader of the Labour Party, Phil Goff, recounted the significance of the objects that Rātana had presented to Michael Joseph Savage. The potato and the three feathers, the broken watch, and the punamu, representing the land that had been taken, the mana that had been trampled, and the promises that had been broken. There are a few politicians in Parliament today that seem to have either never understood the significance of that story or have chosen to forget it. Because we've made so much progress as a country in recent years, and now is not the time to turn our back on that progress. A lot has happened since I came here this time last year with my predecessor Jacinda Ardern in one of her final acts as our Prime Minister and one of my first. I want to acknowledge the Rātana Band as Jacinda acknowledged last year, Ngā reo o Rātana, and thank them for clearing the way for us to be here today. It's a pretty cool way to start the political year, to be welcomed on by a brass band, although this political year has started a little bit earlier than most. A lot has happened over the last year. Flooding followed not long after our visit here last year, then a cyclone, and a general election later in the year that produced a result that I'm not sure many people here would be particularly happy with. The election of a new government. A government who will be here later on today. And I'm sure that they will be eager to tell you all of the things that they want to do for you. They'll probably be less inclined to talk about the things they want to do with you, and even less inclined to talk about the things that they want to do to you. But the reality is, this is a government with an agenda that wants to take New Zealand backwards. The disestablishment of the Māori Health Authority. Turning the clock back when it comes to the use of te reo Māori amongst our public servants and in our day-to-day lives as New Zealanders. Rewriting te treaty. Ending co-governance and going back on many of the commitments that have been made that have been designed to undo the wrongs of the past. Abolishing Māori representation in local government. Increasing smoking in order to pay for tax cuts for the wealthy. Winding back provisions in the Oranga Tamariki legislation that recognise Māori. And backing away from the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. I mention those last two things because those last two things were signed up to by the last national government. It shows how far away they have moved from where they were just a short time ago. And it should never be allowed, they should never be allowed to simply apportion those policies to the two smaller parties in this government. The National Party signed up to them. It is their signature on the bottom of the page that commits the government to supporting them. And all three of the parties in the government need to explain them and take responsibility for the policies that they have signed up to. Because harm from this approach is not just harm that is coming directly from the government. The policies of this government are emboldening others. Hobson's choice is just one. The policies of this current government encourage, foster and enable racism in New Zealand. And we should call that out for what it is. Because, to quote Peni Henare's late grandfather, we have come too far not to go further, we have done too much not to do more. Can I acknowledge you, Kingi Tuheitia, and your leadership in calling for unity, in seeking to bring us together as a country, because that is the path forward that will benefit all of us, not just Māori, but non-Māori as well. Last year, in one of my first official acts as Prime Minister, I spoke at Waitangi, and I talked about the need for us to move together as a country, move forward together as a country. And that means that the role of us as political leaders is to light that path forward. It's not to exploit the fear that comes from uncertainty. And yet that is what has happened over much of the past year. I can reassure you that the New Zealand Labour Party remains committed to lighting the path forward. We remain committed to the things that we signed up to in government, including the establishment of the Māori Health Authority, including the use of Te Reo Māori across the country, including a by Māori and for Māori approach, because we believe that that is the sort of approach that is going to see the whole country flourish in the future. And we will continue to move forward in that direction. But I also do want to acknowledge that we didn't get everything right. And one of the things that we didn't get right was making sure that we were bringing non-Māori New Zealanders along with us on that journey. And I want to pledge to you today that we will redouble our efforts to do that. Because when people are falling behind, the solution isn't to turn around and go back in the other direction. It's to make sure you're bringing people with you. And that is what we want to do as the New Zealand Labour Party. This, to some extent, is our fight, but it's more your fight. But we are here to walk alongside you. And sometimes to clear the path, as the Rātana Brass Band did for us as we arrived here today. And that is exactly what we propose to do over the coming 3 years. To ensure that 3 years from now we can be gathering and celebrating a new beginning, where we can pick up and continue to make the progress that we have been making, where we can move the country forward in a spirit of unity, the spirit of unity that you have been calling for and that we endorse. Nō reira, ngā whānau o te hahi Rātana, ngā Māori katoa, kia kaha, kia maia, kia manawanui. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.